Beautiful song that features in the Siege of Jadotville, which is an Irish war movie. That's what they call it. It's not a genre we'd be widely familiar with, but it does tell the story of 150 Irish peacekeeping troops who find themselves under siege by about 3,000 mercenaries in the Congo in 1961. And the film stars, among others, Jamie Dornan, who joins us this morning. Jamie, you're probably sick of the sight of me at this stage.
Oh, I've seen enough of you, yeah.
I'll get out. Welcome to the programme. Nice to see you again. Of course, we spoke about another movie about 2 weeks ago, but Here you are for different reasons this morning as you play the lead role as Commandant Pat Quillen. But the movie's director, Richie Smyth, whose interest and tenacity in the telling of this story has culminated in his first feature film, joins us also this morning. It's nice to see you today.
Hey,
thanks for coming in. Well, let's talk for... You were enjoying Cupid there.
I was enjoying Cupid, yeah. I heard it last night again when I watched... I love Sam Cooke anyway. But we played it when we actually shot that scene that is in the movie, that song. On the day, we played that song and I loved it, but often you do that and then when the film comes out, it's a totally different song because they haven't been able to get a hold of that track. But
it was a tricky one, yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure it probably was, but it's a beautiful song.
Was it tricky, Richie?
Yeah, I mean, just like, because you never know what you got to go through all the publishing and
the rights and all the boring stuff.
So usually, Jamie's completely right, you just use anything, and usually the best song you can possibly find, and then you get told, well, there's not a chance you're going to get that, you know.
Did you pick that song? I know I'm going on about the song, but just while we're here and we played it, did you pick that song for a reason?
Do you know what? I can't remember if it was me or if it was Alex, my editor. It's such a blur because it's nearly a year ago.
The reason I ask is because that's your background in some regards is music and music videos, and of course you were in a band once upon a time, so this is all of interest to you, the music.
I mean, he tried to get me to make a video for his band, but I wasn't going to have any of that, you know.
That didn't work out.
That's a lie.
Maybe. Okay, let's try and deal with the truth here. How did most unfortunately, I wasn't in a position to go to the premiere last night, but I believe it went very well, and Dave Fanning did the honours last night for you. And how did that go? Questions and answers, the premiere in the Savoy.
Yeah, Dave was interesting. He had sort of like slightly curveball questions for us. We got through it.
That's the style.
You were missed.
I doubt that. But it was it an enjoyable affair altogether?
It was amazing.
It was brilliant. You know, you make films and whatever, and they have a lot of relevance. You hope. Everywhere in the world, something like doing something for Netflix is exciting for that reason, and it has quite a reach, for the most part. But a very nice aspect of it is this is an Irish story, and to actually show it in Ireland with a great number of the boys who are actually, served in Jadotville in 1961. Who are still with us. We're all there last night, and it was quite special, wasn't it?
There's good pictures.
Many of the families of the men who've since passed, they were there as well. So, and it's quite
emotional.
It was very emotional, and especially at the end. But there was, I don't know, we were to capacity, and it was a great screening. I don't think you really get a better screening than that.
Good. Well, I mean, given the story, we should really talk about the story because that's the key to this film, clearly. But it's also it's complicated in the sense that. Was it hidden? Would you say it was a hidden story, Jamie, or was it?
I think that's fair to say. It was brushed under the carpet. There's a million analogies you could use, but which is very frustrating because it's a story that should be celebrated, and the fact that I'm from this island and didn't know it, and I'm not alone when I say that. There's plenty of people who don't know about the story,
right.
And. That's a tragedy, I think, because these men were proper heroes, and what they did was, this is the hardest part of it, actually. Not only were they not, heralded, they were, they came back and they had the totally opposite effect of what should have happened in response to how they should have been treated, and, there's derogatory terms used for these lads. Jadotville Jacks, which was then... in the military going forward, the Irish military going forward, any act of cowardice, people were called Jadotville Jacks. And it was a derogatory term, and because they had, surrendered, and that was seen as a sign of weakness. But hopefully our film shines light on the reality, which was that what they did was. So heroic.
What happened at Jadotville? For the uninitiated, it's really important to put this in context for the rest of our conversation. Maybe you'd like to take that, Richie.
Yeah, sure. What happened at Jadotville was Conor Cruise O'Brien was in charge of the Congo division of the UN.
Yeah.
And there was already a large UN sort of presence because of the Congo crisis. Dag Hammarskjöld, who was the UN General Secretary, had sent Connor to Elizabethville with a plan which was called Operation Morthor, which was a slightly aggressive plan. So as soon as he kind of gave him the job, he also kind of distanced himself and left it for Connor to sort out. Connor realised when he got there that there was a town called Jadotville with nobody stationed in it because the a Swedish force that was stationed there as UN peacekeeping troops had left and come back. And he sort of went, that's going to look really bad, so we need to get someone out there. So he just fired out a company, 150 soldiers, without really thinking about it. And then he got tucked into the Operation Morthor, which was an assault on government buildings in Elizabethville. Not realising that by an aggressive act like that, he could create, an enemy line. And so they got caught behind enemy lines because of that and couldn't get out, and he couldn't get them out, and nor could anybody. And even so, they were waiting for help. And the reason why, when they went into Jadotville, it was so dangerous was because Jadotville was a mining town in the Katanga region, and it was very rich in cobalt and copper and uranium, which were all necessary for the superpowers,
like a proxy war for the Cold
War.
Well,
there was there was many proxy wars.
Of course, at that time.
Sort of like the Vietnam War was a proxy war,
precisely,
right?
yeah.
And so this was another mounting proxy war, because it was the Cold War.
Yes,
and so the town. So when Belgium pulled out of the Congo, they were kind of sneaky. They didn't really educate anybody with an infrastructure to support the country and run the country. So when Lumumba was assassinated, the whole country went into civil war. And then meanwhile, the Belgians were continuing to siphon all the minerals out of the Katanga region. So there was a private army of several thousand mercenary soldiers, independent of anything else, guarding the mines and the interests of these countries who were siphoning the
You do something really, which I love in historical movies, but based on reality, obviously, is the mix of a bit of footage from the time, which I really enjoy seeing. You know when you set the scene, going, this is the context, and then you mix in a bit of the reading in the ears footage, if you know what I mean. It brings it to life, really.
No, it really does, and it's very exciting. When you've got that access to that kind of material that works, and actually the Kennedy statement about Dag's death, we found that quite late, and it was so exciting, because he actually talks about the Katanga region and coming to save them. So that was amazing.
That brings it to another stage altogether. Jamie, you, as you rightly said, and I count myself among the people who really just knew nothing about this, even though I have a huge interest in the country and our past. But what about that element of the soldiers, when the dignity with which they carry themselves? I was very struck by, given the fact that they were really goosed.
Totally, and look, they were, so ill prepared for what they faced, and that is no fault of their own. But they were sent out as a peacekeeping force, and then suddenly they find themselves, 20 to 1, in a battle siege, totally unprepared with weapons that are archaic for the time, and the average age of a company of 157 lads was 18.
Yeah,
I mean, they're boys. I mean, they're really boys, and most of them had never left Ireland before.
As the guy said in the bar, how much action have you seen? How many wars have you fought? And they're sitting there going, "Look, I'm not even going to answer. I'll drink your cognac and get out of here because it's bad news." Did you do much historical research yourself? I understand you did a bit of reading around it, or talk to people. Tell me about that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's nice when you're playing someone who existed, and you're trying to portray a piece of history that actually happened, especially it's relatively recent history, so there's people to draw upon who were there, which was invaluable. I got to speak to a couple of guys who served out in Jadotville under Quinlan, and asked them, Quinlan himself died back in 97, but I was able to ask some of the guys about him, and we had Conor Quinlan, who's Pat Quinlan's grandson, who was in the cast with us. So he was with me and the rest of us for 3.5 months or whatever it was in Johannesburg. So kind of amazing to be able to pick his brain wherever I could. He was brilliant at giving me a great sense of who his grandfather was, and he sent me very early on an email with all the letters that Quinlan wrote home to his wife throughout his whole time in the Congo, and I felt very privileged to have access to that kind of thing.
That must give you great insight into
massively so, because it's kind of hard to sort of grasp what they were going through, based purely on facts, so to have that insight was mad.
I'm curious as to how Richie got to the screen, given that it was kind of hidden in a corner of our history, if you know what I mean. I know Declan Power, who would be very respected as a military commentator as well as a former soldier, would have wrote the book.
He did, yeah.
And that's going to be helpful to anyone in bringing it to the screen. But who was it that came along and said, this has to turn into something more than just a book on a shelf?
Actually, the kind of genesis of it was, I was reading a book about 7 years ago called Guns for Hire, which was a history of the mercenary soldier. And it started with the Pinkertons in Scotland going to America, and they were hired to police the railroads and kill Jesse James, and it went through that, the Civil Wars, into modern day warfare, and it's the complete history. And right in the middle, it was just this one page right in the middle of the book about these Irish, small group of Irish soldiers that came up against a huge force of mercs and stood up to them and fought like heroes. You know? And I was like, holy shit, I've never seen this. I don't know anything about this. So that's where I started investigating, and once I started investigating, I very quickly found Declan's book. And so I optioned the book and started working with a writer, Kevin Broadbin.
Yes.
And that took about 4 years before we had a script where people were responding when they read it. And then Alan Maloney, who's my producer and the producer of the movie, he came on board, and we went to Berlin with it. And that's where Netflix kind of swooped in. Yeah. And then it just took off from there, really. Once that happened and we signed up to Netflix, then it was really just about making the movie, And at that point, Jamie he'd read the script and liked it. So we had a kind of a small package,
And is it true that yourself and Alan Maloney saw a lot of Pat Quinlan in Jamie Dornan?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
What do you mean by that? What did you see?
Quinlan was... he was kind of a maverick, He was a great tactician and strategist, but he also had a really sort of interesting sort of presence about him, sort of what I call the Steve McQueen factor. I'm always sort of slagging him, but I think he has that Steve McQueen factor. In fact, I would have cast Steve McQueen if he was alive, but
you could only get Jamie. Jamie, sorry about that. Steve McQueen wasn't available for selection that day.
I think Steve McQueen would have struggled even more than me with a Kerry accent.
Actually,
good point. You want to save my answer?
Yeah, that was a good say. Let's talk about the Kerry accent. I'm not from Kerry, but I was impressed because it's very hard to mimic it. Last time I saw you, it was an anthropoid, and you were a Czech, and now you're Kerry. Which was harder, Kerry or Czech? I'd say Kerry, actually. Probably.
Kerry was, no, in a way, because Czech is meant to be quite soft, and it's kind of meant to be quite subtle and not be too jarring and take your mind away from everything. So it's actually trickier, I think, to do that. At least Kerry, you can kind of go for it, it's something to really throw yourself at. In saying that, we... myself and Brendan Gunn, who is a dialect coach from the north, actually, who worked with me on the Kerry accent, we decided that, there are tapes of Quinlan that exist, and he's got a very hardcore Kerry accent. His voice is quite high, he speaks very fast, and it's very Kerry. And, we want this to reach a global audience. And
you're being very tactical.
No, but I prefer.
You know what I mean.
I prefer it to be in. I prefer it to be in the States without subtitles, and I know they do that, and I find that hugely racist and frustrating. Yeah, when you see that, happens all the time. Happens to people from all over Ireland on the news in the States or whatever, and they subtitle them when they're speaking English, and it really bothers me.
Okay.
So we thought that we shouldn't go for anything too extreme and make it more of a sort of monster accent with Kerryisms in it, so that people would understand it.
You had a voice coach for that, and you listened to tapes, obviously. Is that right? Is that
there's tapes that exist of Quinlan speaking, and and I've got we have a mutual friend actually who's from Cork, from Skibbereen, and actually there's he's actually got quite a nice general. He's been in the States for 20 years, although he sounds like he left Skibbereen about an hour ago. But he's got a nice general sort of monster accent, so I drew on
you got that.
I'm not even going to mention. I'm not going to give him the service of mentioning.
You're not even going to.
He's going to be Carmody.
He just got the nod now.
He did.
It was a while. Gary is on about text 51551. Says, I'm about to start an army cadetship on Monday, and that story of Jadotville has given me a huge morale boost before I start. Isn't that nice for the next generation to hear that?
Yeah.
Another from Elaine in Galway says, very emotional night at the Savoy for the survivors of Jadotville and their families. Please pass on my congratulations to Jamie Dornan for a wonderful portrayal of my grandfather. There you are. And to all the cast and crew, including my little brother Connor. So sad, though, that Pat Quinlan never got any recognition for his actions when he was alive. Tell me a bit, you said when we sat down to chat this morning, Jamie, that you thought it was emotional last night. In what sense?
Well, you know, some of the boys who served in Jadotville were there, plenty of them. I think there's about 40 who are still alive from the 157 who were out there. And, you know, they are little by little, and I think this film is helping, getting somewhat recognition for the heroics that they achieved in 1961. There's a gesture made in 2005, was it, when they erected the...
It was a plaque, wasn't there?
Plaque in Athlone. And, and then they got further recognition a couple of weeks ago. But, you know, it is still a long way to go, I feel.
Is it?
I feel that they should have medals and, you know... I think it's the least they could do, you know, and it angers me almost that Quinlan, you know, isn't around to see any of this, you know. But I do think like the honouring they've had recently is just the first step. I think
it's extraordinary how even to get that lovely message from his granddaughter in Galway, and that his son is in the movie with you guys, how powerful history travels within a family. And you saw that last night. You mentioned there just a few minutes ago, Richie, about the idea that some of the soldiers who weren't still around, still their families still want to be part of that story, that sense of vindication, that sense of atonement, of getting it right.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, also when you're in the army, it's like a family in itself, you know, and the fact that within that there was that kind of level of betrayal. Yeah. The hurt runs deep, you know.
A text from Mick Sheridan says, one of my earliest memories is returning as an 8-year-old from school to a row of army houses in Athlone to find every woman from the 20 houses on the street crying and consoling one another. They'd heard a BBC report that 50 Irish soldiers had been killed in Jadotville. I didn't know this. Unfortunately, the report turned out to be untrue. These men had instead acquitted themselves with conspicuous bravery, nicely put. And my father was in fact one of the first men in the replacement battalion that took over from the 36th in 1961. I'm delighted that their exploits have finally been acknowledged by a reluctant government. You seem to be getting this very broad welcome from people who are saying about bloody time.
Yeah.
That seems to be the kind of the sense of it.
It's kind of amazing actually how many people have come out of the woodwork and literally say, oh, my uncle was there, or you know, my grandfather, and we have letters from people who wrote back because there was a lot of communication going on. It's like the whole country in some way had a connection with it, and that's what's incredible, that no one spoke about it for so long. You know, it wasn't even an elephant in the room, you know. It was less than that.
Well, that's changed now thanks to the release of the movie, and it's going to be released in Ireland and the UK as of last night. I think it's getting a cinema release, broadly speaking, and then of course globally on Netflix on the 7th of October. And I think that's in itself is fascinating, because with that audience, that massive audience for that small but deeply significant story is in some way a vindication of the ignorance of the last number of years.
It is,
So it's good news in that sense. Jamie, you're proud of this film. I get that. I definitely get that sense from you.
I'm very proud of it. You know, I think I speak for all the boys involved in making it, and boys and girls, although there weren't many girls in this around this.
It was a long few months in
it. Well, luckily I had my family out in South Africa with me, so I was okay. But some of the other boys were losing their minds a bit. But yeah, no, it means a lot to us. Not you know, regardless of being Irish, I think it would just mean a lot to us anyway. But the fact that for the most part we were all Irish, there's a couple of English boys in the cast, but they were easily converted in terms of, didn't need much motivation in terms of the story meaning anything to them. We did a great thing when we had 2 weeks of boot camp, like army training before we started filming out in Joburg, and we had all the extras do the boot camp with us, and then we're talking about 80 odd South African lads, and had to run around pretending to look Irish for 3 months, and rather than them just turning up to work every day and not getting paid very much and just running away from the bad guys or running towards the bad guys and not having any sense of what they're dealing with, we did was it probably your idea actually, was it, Richie? Yeah. But we had a lovely thing where we sat them all down and all these guys from South Africa, and we each told them a little bit about the history of this mission and why it meant so much to the people of Ireland, and how these lads weren't recognised in the rightful way, and just to get them on board and get them involved, and get them motivated every day. It was incredible. There were tears in their eyes, and it was mad. It's
been very good to see you both. Thanks for coming in this morning, and continued success in everything you're doing. Jamie Dornan and Richie Smyth. The movie is called The Siege of Jadotville, and all details, I've mentioned them to you already, but it's been great to talk about that important moment.